Hello everybody. In today's video, I'm just going to be talking about whatever. I haven't really made a video like this in quite a long time. Again, because obviously it does take literally quite a long time to make a video like this, where I'm just talking and talking and talking for a long period of time. Like over an hour. But I intentionally do this kind of stuff because I started to realize that people do have, in fact, the attention span to do that. And two, people always try to worry about, folks, individuals, that are having low attention span, that are becoming highly illiterate. But here's the thing. Humans are not very good at adjusting to things. That's why traditionalism stays around for so long. It's not necessarily because of nostalgia alone. If it was from nostalgia alone, a lot of traditionalism, ancient traditionalism that's still around would have died off in that time period that it comes from, because, well, they didn't have TV back then, They didn't have TV, radio, the internet, like we do in this era, the era that I had this recording in, the ancients before this time, most people would just have books, like, say, 80 Days Around the World. That's an older book. I haven't really read it, but I do have a book of 80 Days Around the World. If you want proof, here it is, right here. It says, around the world in 80 days, okay? Around the world in 80 days. But it did inspire the movie in 80 Days Around the World. Here's the thing. That's not what the book is called. The book is from, I believe, if my math is correct, 1876. I'm not sure, but I want to look. I want to take a look-see. See if I'm correct or if I'm wrong. No. On the book right there. 1873, so I was 3 years off. Damn, this book is old as shit, like, this is about, 10, 20, this would be about 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. This would be about 25 years older than the fictional character from Stargate SG-1, Teal'c. Because in lore, in universe, he was born in 1898. Which would mean that if he was alive in the time of this recording, alive in the time of when I made this video, in the year that I made this video anyway, that would mean that this character, this fictional character, would be 128 years old, or turning 128 years old this year, And obviously his character is a lot younger, or else he'd be dead. or he'd be somehow really incredibly old, you know? But just for context of when he was born, the U.S. Civil War ended in 1865. You know, so that would be like what? 1865, 1875, 10 years, 1885, 20 years, 1895, 30 years. Okay, 13 years. Then that would be 1, 2, 3. So that would be 33 years. 33 years. The Civil War ended 33 years prior to his birth. You know? So he would have been 18 by the time, well, not 18, but he would have been 16 when World War I started. He would have been in his 40s by the time World War II started. He would have been specifically 41. Assuming my math is correct. But let's just say he was born in the first of the year. January, I think the first month is, isn't it? Let's say he was born on January 1st. Just for context, if he would have been 103, you know, and when 9/11 happened, he would have been 122, I believe, when 2020 happened. And obviously, assuming if you're watching this in, say, 2028, for example, he would be 130. Okay? Motherfucker would be old. That's what I'm trying to say. Alright? He would be from a long time ago. Like, if his age matched the age of, you know, like, let's say if his character was copyrighted at the same year that his character was born in, if that was real, he would be already, like, permanently in the public domain, you know, worldwide, because he's over 120 years old, you know, because generally stuff that's over 120 years old can't really be, unless there's a existing copyright that's still in place by a person who's still alive, that still owns the original copyright. Like, the original person who made the copyright is still alive. If they're dead, then however long the copyright in that country lasts, which even for Mexico is 100 years, then they legally can't really copy it, because once you have something that's 120 years old, generally speaking, you cannot, like, over it, you cannot copyright it, you cannot re-copyright something, you know? Like, it's been in the public domain for so long that you can just put it back into copyright. But, again, once it starts getting to that 120 year mark from when it was originally copyrighted, at least from what I'm told, then it's public domain, you know? And I wish things couldn't just, you know, from the public domain go back into copyright. Like, if you're gonna make something original from, you know, stuff that once was copyrighted, and then make something copyrighted out of it, fine, because Star Wars did that, Indiana Jones, I think, did that, Walt Disney definitely fucking did that, Um, let's see. Nickelodeon, I believe, did that. The company of Disney, yeah, they did that. Let's see, what else? I think the people who made Stargate SG-1 did that as well, because I'm pretty sure the it's legally copyrighted, so it won't really, the entire show won't really be public domain until the 2070s, late 2070s, until 2078. It won't be fully public domain, that entire show, if you're counting like by episode, because I don't know how long that copyright would last, generally speaking. And they say for life, but it's like, is it still copyrighted? Is the original person who made the show still alive? Or the people behind this still alive? Because if so, whenever that person does die, then their copyright, at least in the United States, it's for however long they live plus 70 years. So whenever they die, they'll add 70 years of copyright from whenever they died, like to the exact date. So 70 years after this person's death, it will be copyrighted for the next 70 years, which doesn't really make any sense to have that kind of copyright. Wouldn't it make more sense to have a copyright where from when you copyright it, that would just be 70 years, it wouldn't be like for life? Because the problem with that kind of copyright is, let's say you're immortal, then you always have it copyrighted. You see how that could easily be exploited by like a company, or say like just somebody who always had that kind of power, where basically they just have certain things always being copyrighted all the time because they freak out the system or something, where they make them seem like, oh, they somehow mysteriously turned 1,000 years old even though they died, long before they even turned 30, historically. Like, there's something like that. But I would say, if from when it's copyrighted, its copyright is older than however long the copyright is supposed to last after death. If that copyright was posted longer than that, if you still have that rule, I would say whenever it goes into the public domain, it stays in the public domain permanently. Like it shouldn't go back into copyright. You know what I mean? Like, it has no right to be or stay in copyright after a certain amount of time. I would say like say 70 years is how long it can be copyrighted after whoever made the copyright passed away, right? Like, that's how it works in real life. Well, if it's a 70-year gap, then that would mean if the copyright was made, say, 70 years ago before that person's death, then by default that copyright should be already public domain, that kind of thing. Because, well, what can I say? It would make a lot more sense. It would make a lot more sense to do that kind of thing. But if I were to control copyright, I would make trademarks, illegal. I would make patents illegal, stuff like that. because I don't know why they're trying to trademark words or trademark colors. Like, you shouldn't have the right to do that, if you ask me. Like, words, maybe, but colors, no. Like, maybe you could temporarily own or trademark words. Temporarily, you know? But, it shouldn't be, like, copyrighted more than, once. And once it's copyrighted after that one time, then you gotta stop using it after the copyright ends. Like, at least as a copyrighted thing or a trademarked thing. Like 5 years. Like 5 years or something. Patents shouldn't really exist. Like, I get that you're trying to legally save your product, but, if you're trying to trademark a superpower, or trying to trademark a certain action, or certain things, you should not have the right to do that, because, with something that is fictional, and not a non-fiction story, but a fictional story, because usually those are more original, usually those are the kind of things where you can trademark it. Well, not trademark it, but copyright it. I would make music, TV shows, video games, movies, books, stuff like that have original, fictional, copyrighted stuff in it. Whenever it's copyrighted, whenever it had its official copyright, it has to be 10 years after it's copyrighted to go into the public domain, and it can only go back into copyright for another 10 years maximum, okay? Another 5 to 10 years maximum, and anything else that's like, I don't know, 15, 20 years older from its original copyright, assuming it's not already copyrighted, then it's permanently in the public domain, That's what I would do, so that way there's actual shift. There's actual, that kind of thing. But the only way it could really be ever, taken back into copyright is if, like, again, the copyright ended, its time span. Like, there's a 5-year time span, really, when you can put it back into copyright if you wanted to. That's assuming you're going to. Even then, you can only do it once. And once you do that once, then it's out of juice, And if you don't copyright it 5 years after it was in public domain, then it's public domain worldwide, Like, it's permanently in the public domain worldwide, and then if you do copyright it again 10 years after that, it will be permanently in the public domain worldwide. You know what I mean? Like there's no one country that should really hold in copyright, that should really have the right on copyright, in their land. If you ask me, worldwide, it would be better not just to have, let's instantly take something that's already in the public domain and just put it into copyright. Like, no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't have the right to do that. In my perfect world, if I truly owned copyright, I would literally just, 5 years maximum, okay? Not minimum, not bare minimum, but maximum, okay? The farthest maximum you can go is 10 years, alright? As soon as you copyright it, 10 years after that copyright has been around, it's public domain permanently, okay? You can't just constantly, consistently, keep it copyrighted for generations and generations and generations long after you're gone, and then by the time it does permanently go into the public domain, or just in the public domain, at least in that country or nation, if it still even exists at the time, and copyright laws don't change, then, well, buddy, I'm telling you, what the fuck, like, it really messes my head that there are certain things that people can't make simply for the fact that it's copyrighted, like, most of the things that could be public domain and kind of need to be public domain while they're still culturally relevant, are always, like, seemingly in copyright, because by the time it does go into the public domain, it won't just be forgotten, but it will be to the point where nobody will really use it anymore, for the simple fact that, well, it was copyrighted for so long, it's just kind of forgotten, like when the original Mickey Mouse cartoon got it, like, it still has some cultural effect because the company that owns the modern version of it is still copyrighted, whereas the original Mickey Mouse, the one in the Steamboat Willie, that's public domain, But the thing is that with the Mickey Mouse Protection Act, it basically extended their power for copyright, which, again, they really should not, like, big corporations and things like that should really have not, like, don't have the right to decide, what copyright is or isn't, that kind of thing. And then there's a lot of other topics, like, you might have been on the news lately, I don't know about you, but I heard California, I don't know if this is true or not, California might declare independence, which is honestly kind of shocking even for California. And the thing is about it is, I know, I've been talking, like, most of this video about copyright, but what would that look like? Like, say in 2028, that's when they're going to try to vote to get it on the ballot. Well, I think what they're trying to do is get it on the ballot so that way they can try to vote for it in their version of Congress, I guess. California Congress, or whatever their equivalent is, I guess. And then once they have that on the ballot, as they say, then they try to get it, as one of the main focuses that year or something. And then, I don't know. Like, they're trying to get it on the ballot by November 2028. I don't know. And then I would say maybe if it does, I don't know, let's say they get the approval of Congress in 38 states, U.S. Congress, by the way, 38 states to secede, as they call it, from the United States, like become their own sovereign nation and country from the United States. Let's say that becomes successful and they do, in fact, become independent, say by, I don't know, 2030. If that ever does happen by 2030, let's say, I don't know, because November was the time they tried to put it on the ballot. Let's say, I don't know, November 21st, right? November 21st, 2030. What would that even look like? You know? Or maybe say November 1st, 2029, but it has yet to be determined if they actually ever will become independent. Or even if they don't get approval, what if they decide to declare independence anyway? You know? That kind of thing. What would happen to the U.S. government? What would happen if, say, they would have to split up the army and every person who's from California has to go to California, and every person who's not from California has to consider California a separate, not just separate nation, but also a foreign nation, meaning that a lot of American movies or American TV shows, video games, books, songs are all foreign. They all come from a foreign country, a foreign nation. Like Hollywood would be a foreign industry, and people would have a reason to justify hating on Hollywood a lot more than they already do. Like right now, they're a part of the United States, time of recording, and if California ever does become successful in doing this, that would just give them a real fucking reason to just hate on California, to just hate on especially Hollywood, because that's where a lot of the money flows in. That's where a lot of their power comes from, at least culturally and maybe politically or religiously if you want to go that far. But when it comes to entertainment and stuff like that, that's your place to go in California, at least in terms of big budgets, that kind of thing. Like big actors, big money, big stuff. You know what I mean? And the main reason why I'm talking about this is because I saw it on the news recently, and I don't pay much attention to legacy media, as they call themselves. But when I do pay attention to it, sometimes it does become interesting. Sometimes I do get to find something that I particularly like. And one of those things was, again, California may or may not potentially do that. But then another thing is, would they still call their English English, or would they just call it Californian? Would they just call their version of English just California and call their language California? Then how would we explain nationality to somebody? You know what I mean? Like if they become another North American country, how are we going to explain that to, say, a British person or an Australian person? The complicated situation. How are we going to explain it to the fucking Italians, bro? Like, how are we going to explain that to the French, or the Spanish, or the Moroccans, or anybody else who's not from USA, with the exception of Canada and Mexico, of course? How would we explain that? I have no fucking clue. That's the craziest thing. I have no clue how we would explain that to, say, Brazil or something, or South Sudan, somebody who's South Sudanian, if that's the correct term for somebody who's from South Sudan. But I think you get the idea, kind of. Why do I seemingly get darker when I'm in this angle? And kind of brighter when I'm in this one? I don't know, it's kind of weird. Anyway. Yeah, that would be kind of strange. And then there's Alaska, and Florida, and Texas, and Michigan, and Louisiana, and Mississippi, and now I know they try to say like, oh, if it was a country, New England would be a country, but New England is not a U.S. state, it's a region of states. And if you know anything about modern New England, you would know that these states don't really get along, and these states, if they were to become independent, they would not be the same country, okay? They would not be in the same nation, you know? They would be at least 13, you know? At least 13 or 7 nations right there, you know? Because ain't no fucking way you're gonna put fucking Maryland with the New York or New York with fucking New Jersey, okay? Like, that ain't gonna happen. Now, I know that kind of sounds stereotypical, but you gotta understand that this is fucking New England, okay? These guys hate each other's guts. If these guys went independent, they would just have more all the reason to do so, okay? Similar thing can be said with Ohio and Michigan. Don't put these two motherfuckers in the same nation if they ever, you know, have an independence thing going on. Because, let's say, for example, Ohio declared independence, and then, I don't know, Michigan later on declared independence or whatever. Even in a scenario like that, or in a scenario where it's like they both declared independence, you know, as one nation, eventually it would quickly balkanize into two parts, Ohio and Michigan, okay? Because it doesn't matter what you do, if these guys become like, you know, no longer USA, just don't put them in the same fucking country, okay? Like, we don't need a civil fucking war, you know, over some bullshit like, oh, you're from Ohio, you're from Michigan. Like, if it was a war over two different nations, maybe you could justify it because it's like, oh, it's two different countries that are foreign from each other, you know, either than being, like, geography-wise close, you know, that kind of thing. But it's like, that's where Folk Valley is, you know? Ohio, for example. Like, those motherfuckers really do not want to ever be Michigan, okay? They do not ever want to be Michigan. And then you go to Lansing or Detroit or, hell, even the UP or Adrian, which, if you're wondering, yes, Adrian, Michigan is a real town in Michigan. You can fucking look it up if you don't believe me. Alright? Even places like that, if somebody said, oh, would you want to be a part of Ohio? They'd be like, fuck no, you know, because it's not that they don't have relatives in Ohio. It's not like they are the biggest haters of Ohio, although a lot of those kind of people are. Those kind of folks are. But, it's in Michigan, you know? They don't really want to be a part of Ohio. They don't want to be a part of that identity. You know what I mean? That worldview. Excuse me for the finger wagging. I had to turn off some notifications in order to talk about my point. But, yeah. And then you have, again, states like California. But, you have states like Texas. Which might surprise some of you watching this. Because I'm not mentioning Alaska or Hawaii as much, but I'll get to that later. Okay? Texas does seem like a really obvious one because, let's be for real, when they say, there are two countries, um, that the U.S. likes, number one is America and second is Texas. Like, Texas really could become their own nation in the future once again. And if you historically don't know, there were historical points of Texas where they were their own nation for a time. But it could happen again given that it's fucking Texas. Okay? Like, if they had a chance, they would. If they had a fucking chance, they would. Like, Sandy Cheeks would be bragging. You know what I mean? Like, I can't believe that the Chilean flag copied their ass and let's make that slightly more miniature, Like, that's basically what they look like they're fucking doing. Not the exact same, I know it's kind of a meme. But, still, it's like, you look like you copied the Texas flag and, made your own version of it. Like, that's what Chile looks like when they have their flag. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't look like the other way around, at all. Considering that Chile has not been around as long as the U.S. has, and I believe Texas has probably been around slightly longer, but, I should check my historical dates. But if you want to be official about it, yeah, Chile formed much later than the U.S. did. Well, super later. I just mean the U.S. was around before they were their own independent thing. I'm not doing that as a brag necessarily. I'm just saying. Anyway, if you're wondering, yes, USA, time of recording, is the oldest nation in the Americas, okay? And I say time of recording because you never know when, say, the USA just disappears off the map and no longer exists. Similar thing could be said of Canada or Mexico or Brazil, Venezuela, again, Chile, basically any nation on the current map. Not just in North or South America, Cuba, but also Africa, Europe, Asia, Oceania, if there are any, Antarctica, that kind of thing. But just to know, the only reason why Europe is considered a separate continent from Asia doesn't really have to do with geography, and it's more of just a cultural, societal, and mostly religious and political reason why Europe is a different continent. Actually, they're just a part of Asia, but obviously Asia is kind of already too big, so I can kind of see why they would declare or have Europe as considered as a cultural or political separate continent from Asia, or just call it Eurasia, which is a combination of Europe and Asia. But then there would be Afro-Eurasia, which is if you consider, I don't know why I keep talking like that. I don't know why I keep making those weird clay kind of weird, those kind of weird fucking sounds. I don't know how to describe them, but they sound inferior. They sound wrong to me. They sound, no offense, I'm just saying, Californian. No wonder why they're trying to declare independence. But, I kind of forgot what I was just talking about. Oh yeah, geography. I don't personally think that Europe is truly its own continent, but Afro-Eurasia, that includes the three continents of Africa, Europe, and Asia. You know, if you want to include all continents, it would probably be like something like Ant, Numer, Salmer, Ocean, Afro-Eurasia, which means Antarctica, North America, South America, Oceania, Africa, Europe, Asia. Or you could just say Pangea. That kind of thing. Which would be a lot easier in the mouth department. I don't speak Spanish. You know? I don't think I ever will speak Spanish. But if I do, pendejos know where beaners live. You know? Pendejos know it. Fucking pendejos. Okay? I don't know if that means anything in Spanish particularly. But, they say it does. They say it means something. But I don't know. I'm not from Mexico or Spain or from, I think it's called Equatorial Guinea. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Equatorial Ghana. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong when it comes to the African countries, because borders are constantly changing, terms are constantly, being made, that kind of thing. But again, like I said, I don't speak Spanish, so I don't really understand any of it. I've tried to speak Spanish. I've tried to understand it, but it's just really fucking hard. Okay, like it's not easy if it's learned. If it can be learned, it's not exactly easy for somebody like me, because I'm somebody who has a hard time speaking my own language because of me having disabilities, if you know my lore. If you know what I have, and I'm not just saying I have disabilities just to say I have disabilities. Like, I actually do have, physical problems, physical and mental problems. But obviously that's not the only cause of me, not learning Spanish, but the only real main factor is that it's just a different language. It's just a different way of speaking, so it's kind of hard to understand what they're saying when you just don't know. It doesn't matter how hard I study or how hard I live around or get used to around speaking Spanish, like native Spanish speakers, Spanish speaking people. But it's just what the fuck? Why do I have to learn this? It's not like I have to live in a Spanish-speaking country, or I'm in a Spanish-speaking area. If I was, then that would make sense. I would have a reason to actually learn it, because I would have to, it's like fight or flight, survive kind of thing, where it's either learn Spanish or you probably would die, that would make sense if I was saying Mexico, then I would be learning Mexican Spanish. That kind of thing. But I heard from that one African country, that's where they have the clearest Spanish, at least from what I'm told. I don't know. I've never, I've never really spoken it. I only know like a few words, and even then I don't know what all of them mean. That kind of thing. Purple people go crazy for this kind of shit. But they go crazy for a lot of things. Like colonizing other planets. But that's a story for another time if I ever get around to it. But yeah, there are languages that I have thought about actually learning. And yeah, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort. Like I said with Spanish, it's just kind of really hard for me considering that it's a different language. But the languages that I really do want to actually learn would be German, French, potentially in the future if I ever, get around to it, if I ever one day ever learn it, Latin, yeah, there's Japanese, Korean, a lot of other living languages. But I want to have at least one dead language, that being Latin, because there's just not a lot of, like, you would think that there would be considering that it's the internet, but there's just not a lot of YouTube videos that are originally in Latin. There's not like a lot of things that are originally in Latin. Like, you would think that even if there's no native speakers, there's a region in the, say, like Europe or, certain parts of the world where for religious reasons or, say, just political or cultural reasons or just like talking just to talk, they talk purely only in Latin, Like you would think that they would have some version of that. It could be early Latin, like old Latin. It could be mid Latin or classic Latin, or it could be, modern Latin or late Latin. It could be one of those kind of things. But no. It's a complete minority language. Like, what the fuck? If you're gonna use it, like, that really should have native speakers again. That language really should have native speakers. You might go, well, which version of Latin? Whichever version of Latin most people where it was the most version of Latin, where it was the most Latin of Latin could get, especially the one that died off, versions of it that died off, dialects or accents that died off, from the upper class folks, because those are the ones that usually did die off, whereas the common folk turned into Romanian and Spanish and French, I guess, and German, supposedly, and I guess English. And for some reason, I guess Russian? I don't know. Then there are other languages like Norwegian and Dutch and I think Danish is a separate language. I don't know. Then there's Albanian, which I'm not even sure if it's a part of the same group. But yeah, a lot of languages. Okay? A lot of fucking languages is what I'm trying to say. And I don't think I'm gonna learn any of them. Okay? Like most languages, obviously I'm not gonna be learning sign languages because that would be way too fucking hard for me. But personally, I think I'm just fine speaking English, or if you prefer, American. Okay? That's what I prefer to speak, American. Okay? Because, let's be fucking for reals, that's the only language I ever really spoke. You know, that's the only language I've ever really used. That I needed to use. That I had to use. But if I ever do eventually, for whatever reason, move to another country, I will learn whatever language the dominant language is. But if it is conveniently for me, English, then I'll just be glad for that. You know, I'll just be glad I'll be in an English-speaking country. But if I were to say get put in, I don't know, for whatever fucking reason, Argentina, then yeah, I'll probably learn, assuming that's the dominant language there, Argentinian Spanish, because assuming from what I know, that's the dominant language over there. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's what they say. I don't know, I don't speak fucking Spanish. If I were to move to, say, I don't know, Switzerland for some reason, then I would learn their version of German. Or if, say, I moved to, I don't know, fucking Norway, then I would learn Norwegian. Or Denmark, whatever the dominant language is there, which I'm pretty sure if they call it that, it's probably Danish, but I don't know. I don't know what the fucking dominant language of that country is. You know, there's not a whole lot of countries in this world that are dominated by English. You would think there would be because of the UK, and considering that the United Kingdom really took over the world as like a dominant empire for a long time. So you would think that there would be like countries, many countries, where English is just the dominant language, but not really. You know, not really. You know, like yes, Canada and United States does tend to take over a lot of the land, but they're not a bunch of little countries. You know what I mean? At least not yet. But if they were, then you could count that. But you would think that there would be like one region of a bunch of little countries where they all speak English, but not really. Not fucking really. You know, the only other places where English is the dominant language, obviously, besides the UK, for some reason, is Scandinavia. And then, you have, well, there's a bunch of Europe that are like that, but, Australia and New Zealand, you know? And maybe like a few other countries like Singapore. Then there are, I think there's like one country in Africa where English is the majority dominant language. But yeah, don't get me wrong, English is a really dominant language worldwide, and it's like the most spoken second language in the world. Like, it's the default second language is what I'm trying to say. The default second language, lingua franca. But what I'm trying to say is there's not a whole lot of countries where it's not just the largest majority, spoken majority, that kind of thing, the largest default language, if you will, first language. But also, like, the largest, like, majority, like, native speaker language as in their first language. Like, there's not a whole lot of countries like that. But again, you would think that there probably would be, considering that, well, the UK dominated so much, but there's just not. There's just not a lot of countries where most, like, there's like one region where most countries in that region are just, like, the majority of them are just native English speaking countries. Majority native English speaking countries. You know? Because in the United States, the largest majority language is English. You know? That is the majority, the largest majority group. The second largest majority group is Spanish. But if you want to be more specific, Mexican Spanish, because that's the only one where they really have it. But don't get me wrong, there is USA Spanish. There is American dialects. But it's not, like, it's kind of learned from English. So it's not really like, at least not in the current stages, like fully originally Spanish. At least not culturally yet. But in the upcoming decades, in the upcoming years and decades in the future, it is slowly starting to be seen that way. And people, like, they get all doomsday. I think I said this earlier in the video, but people try to get all doomsday. They try to say, oh, it's the end of the world. Oh, it's, attention span, is shrinking. Attention span is getting worse. Literacy is getting worse. Yeah, those things are true, but, and for a long time, I want to say ever since 2016, the majority of people worldwide turned a blind eye to this illiteracy crisis, turned a blind eye to, the technology crisis where everybody's just paying attention to short form video and, has their brains rot out. Don't get me wrong. Some people were probably paying attention to it, hence why they had the dead internet theory starting in 2016. All of 2016, by the way. Anyway, but I want to say 2020 was really the year when everybody had the wake-up call that we were all chronically online, and that it's unhealthy. But even then, I want to say 2022, there was a peak prime, golden age, if you will. It was in the golden age because from 2016 to currently right now, 2026, when I recorded this video, is currently the golden age of brain rot. But it's also still in its prime. It's still, very fresh and very new. It's just newly out of its, it's just stepping out of its golden age. But it's still in its prime. It still has a lot of energy left. To at least keep it that way for now. But I want to say around the height of this prime era, the golden age, if you will, around the height of this prime era during the golden age of brain rot, that would be between, if you ask me, 2018 to about 2022, 2023-ish. But I want to say the absolute peak of this era, when it was the most extreme out of this entire time period, would have been 2022. Okay? 2021 was really just a starter, and 2023 really just mostly ended it all. And 2024 and 2025 just, started really executing it completely. But 2022 was really, it was so chronically online that the most chronically online person in 2020 would have been, the least chronically online person in 2022. You know what I mean? That was really the era and the wake-up call time period that we really started to realize that we are the most chronically online that we ever been in the entire history of all of the internet, especially during that year. And then it kind of went a little bit down in 2023, and then you had a massive uptick in 2024, and then you had a little down spurt in 2025, and a little down spurt again, a little in 2026. And realistically, we're going to have a little or a lot, depending on how that year goes, down spurt in 2027. And then maybe we'll have a little bit of uprise in 2028. But it's just going to keep going downward. You know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong. I don't think people are going to instantly pick up, Aristotle or whatever the hell the original, the Odyssey. I don't think people are going to instantly start picking up those again. Okay? But I do have the feeling that it's not all doom. I think people are trying to find ways to increase their attention span. They're trying to find ways to really just watch things that are just long in general. But eventually, I think it's really just because of this AI stuff and this technology really still being fresh and new to a lot of people. Because in the short term, we can kind of adjust, but not really. We're not really adjusted to last for something like this in the short term. But in the long term, and it's going to take a long time, and I really do mean a long fucking time before we're fully adjusted, I want to say somewhere right around the late 2050s is a realistic starter when we'll just start getting good, at least in the early stages of when we get used to this kind of stuff. And right now, in the meanwhile, that does unfortunately mean that there are a lot of, problems going on in schools. There are a lot of problems going on in the home. There are a lot of problems going on online. That does mean, in the meanwhile, there's going to be a big illiteracy crisis. There's going to be a big attention span crisis. But you watched this whole video. I'm really surprised you actually stayed around for this long. I'm as shocked as you are. But still, you should be able to have the attention span as long as you have, the ability to have an attention span. It should be however long you want it, as long as you're awake to do so. Because most humans, day to day, are usually only awake, or night to night, depending on who you are usually only awake for about 16 or 15 hours or so of their entire day or night, They're only going to be awake for about 15, 16 hours maximum, generally speaking, until their next sleep. Y'all motherfuckers shouldn't be scrolling on the X, on the fucking, Instagram Reels or TikToks, for fucking, or YouTube Shorts, since it's YouTube, for fucking 48 hours straight. I'm not joking about those numbers, okay? I've seen your fucking algorithm, some of you motherfuckers, okay? Some of you chronically, seriously, mentally ill, chronically online motherfuckers. Well, not mentally ill, just, really chronically online. You motherfuckers, you guys, now, excuse me for the poor use of language, but it's just let's be for real, okay? You a jackass, you a fat bastard, alright? You a fat bastard who scrolls so much, you forget you're scrolling you anymore. Have you ever, been watching a video or watching something, and, you were thinking of something, you were, maybe searching up the video, and you found the video you were looking for, and then you forgot what you were thinking about, you forgot the thing that you were searching for, you forgot the reason why you're watching it, And I don't know why, but, I also know, I'm also super confused on why the second you clicked on this video, you started looking at this comment section. You know what I mean? You probably did it way, 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 obviously way before this video even, before you get to this portion of the video. But assuming you actually watched the entire fucking video, which, if you have the time, I'm honestly shocked you have the time to watch a YouTube video for this long. Like, maybe a movie for this long, maybe a TV episode if they have that for some reason this long. But like a YouTube video, you're either unemployed or you're just somebody who just so happens to have a lot of time on their hands. Like I don't know what, like, you probably don't know what to do with yourself. I don't know what to do with myself either. But the only thing I'm trying to do is maybe learn another language, read more. You don't have to start with the around the world in 80 days. You can always start easy, and then start from those, and then just go on to heavier books, whatever you're into, fiction, non-fiction, romance, non-romance, whatever, horror, sci-fi, superheroes, whatever you're into. I don't know what you're into. Sports, perhaps. Religion, maybe. Philosophy, perhaps. Politics or so. If you really want to go that far. Sexualities, genders. That kind of stuff. I don't know. Math, science, history. I don't know what you're fucking into. I don't know why you're looking at me like I'm some sort of nigger of the world. I don't know what's the best word. Okay, I'm not saying you're retarded, but if you are, you gotta be a based retard, okay? You gotta own being a retard. And here's the thing about the time that we live in, 2026, at least the time that I live in. We are the worst time to be alive, but we are also in the best time to be alive. Yes, we do live in a world where most people are dying, but most people are not just dying from just dying, but there are a lot of people that are like that. But, most people dying, at least in my time period, whenever you're watching this, I have no idea when you're watching this, but, whenever, I would say most people dying, yes, there are more people dying than being born, but historically, most people who came from eras like that, usually they would die from being born, they wouldn't die, later in life. The fact that you were even born at all is a miracle in itself, because life begins in the womb, Your lore doesn't really start out as you until you're born, obviously. That's when you as a person starts. Don't get me wrong, you're still alive, you're still the potential to be a person in the womb for 9 months. I still think you're life. I don't believe in abortion, Like, I'm still I'm a semi-Wiccan. We're often hated in lefty circles because we're not fully into the whole transgender thing, and yes, there are transgender Wiccans, but it's not something, we're not fully into the whole LGBTQ socialist ideology, because they're against the state, they're against the class, and Wicca is not exactly against state or class necessarily, so it pisses them off. And then on the right wing, it obviously pisses them off because we're pagans, and also because we're not super anti-woke chuds, yes, we're anti-abortion because we believe that, do as you will and harm none. But one of the things is again, that makes us, not very liked on the left because we're anti-abortion, but we're also not very well liked on the right because, we're a little bit more friendly towards LGBTQ. Not fully accepting, obviously, that kind of thing. But when it comes to topics like this, when it comes to things like this, it gets very hard to talk about. It gets very complicated to talk about. Like, I could have literally gone into the whole, Israel West Bank conflict, with the whole Gaza Strip or whatever, And if West Bank ever does become its own country, which I doubt, given that it's war, it's the most, if you ask me, it's the most recognized failed state, okay? Like, it tried to be a state, but it never really could. It tried to be a nation, but it never really could because it was always constantly at war its entire existence, its entire semi-existence for the past 80 years, because if I'm correct on my history, it's basically been trying to be a separate group ever since Israel has been, being a nation. And the thing is, I do consider Israel as a country and a nation, but it's on thin lines. Like, it's always been in some way or another in semi-existence ever since it gained independence in the late 40s. The original Israel is from, obviously, the Bible and the Torah, but it's not the same Israel. That was the time of when they were still called Israelites. Now they're called Israelis. That's a controversial subject, and obviously that's not the only conflict, or I guess in this case, technically this is a war, right? There's obviously Russia and Ukraine. There's what's going on in South Sudan. There's a lot of places of what's going on in Somalia. Other places like Yemen in the Middle East. Obviously, freaking Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, mostly Africa, South America. Mexico is in a drug war, civil war, basically, because, at least to my knowledge, the cartel basically owns the government. Not completely, but basically owns the government. Cuba seems to be in kind of a civil war. USA might be in a civil war, but I guess that would depend on the state you go to. And I don't know why I keep holding this book, but I guess it's just something to feel. I would say that Canada, at least if you're talking in the biggest North American countries besides Mexico, Canada is like the only real country I could ever see really realistically getting into some sort of civil war, or at least balkanizing in some way. Because if you ask me, Canada, at least politically, shouldn't really even exist. It doesn't really have much of a right to. I mean, it does, and it can, and it still is. Don't get me wrong. I still have Canadian friends. I still, have people that are, from Canada that I know. I don't have any relatives, personally speaking, but, that are from Canada. But, what I mean, it's too, they're too culturally different. They're too politically different. If you ask me, especially with fucking Quebec and Alberta, those should be separate countries. Now, I don't think Alberta should be a part of the U.S. because it's already as complicated as it is. Quebec, obviously, I think they should be their own nations. But Quebec, I don't think, if even if Canada does eventually balkanize, none of you motherfuckers should be EU members, okay? Not even you, Quebec. Alright? Because let's be fucking for real. The European Union is a very sketchy union. Okay? It doesn't really truly represent Europe. That's why they're trying to go for fucking Canada. Because they know that they don't really represent Europe anymore. Okay? They're basically trying to be a more sketchier and eviler version of basically the UN, the United Nations. You know, like they're trying to basically make, you know how they say that Europe isn't a country? Like, oh, it's a continent. It's not a country, it's a continent. But it's like, motherfucker. That's what the European Union is trying to do. They are trying to turn it into a fucking country, basically, into a nation where they can control whatever they want and basically have a 1984 version, like a European version, a modern European version, whatever the modern part is. It's a European control version, okay? It's like an empire bullshit version of 1984, okay? And if you don't know what I mean like there's this book called 1984, which actually wasn't actually made in 1984, but ironically enough, the original Terminator movie came out in 1984, but which really is ironic considering, you know, it's a movie about the future and how there are all these robots and stuff like that, but whatever. Anyway, 1984 takes place in the UK, ironically enough, and basically they invent like some sort of news speak where they can't have, you know, any sex or anything unless it's pre-approved by the government. They're always watched, always listened to, you know, and they're under this really strict, the most strict totalitarian government. Big Brother is watching you, you know, far extremist hardcore group, you know, that kind of thing. It's like the lefty dream, but more realistic sounding, you know, because the only real difference is democratic socialism is just socialism, okay? It's just Marxism, and Marxism, it's just socialism and Marxism are just a couple steps away from being communism. Like, it's all just a form of communism, okay? Like, that's literally all that it is. And you might go, well, what about Nazism? Is Nazism a form of communism? Not really, okay? Nazism is a World War II ideology, and neo-Nazism is based off of that World War II ideology. Fascism is a little bit older than Nazism. Fascism is basically just communism has their own version of fascism, but generally speaking, it's considered more right-wing, even though it doesn't really fit within the right-wing. Fascism is not exactly left-wing, and it's not exactly right-wing, but it is a form of, like, extremist authoritarian ideology, okay? Or totalitarian ideology. Now, authoritarian ideology isn't necessarily bad in itself because it does bring order, but when it turns into totalitarian ideology, that's when you start getting your communists, your Nazis, your North Koreas, your fucking, let's be fucking for real, China, because, yes, China tries to say, oh, we're communist, oh, we're the best, you know, strictest government in the world, and we have 1 billion people. In reality, it's probably more like 500 million, but, you know what I mean. You know what I fucking mean, okay? Like, this government is really fucking sketchy. Yes, it is a strict totalitarian government, but it's also kind of semi-capitalist. Don't say Taiwan is a country, though. Don't say Taiwan is a country. You know, don't say Hong Kong is a country. You know, wait, is Hong Kong like their own separate thing? I don't know. I should ask the historians on DuckDuckGo if that's the case. You know, the historians, the linguists. You know, it's just crazy, man. It's just fucking crazy. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about all of this? I don't know. I don't know why you were looking at the comment section or looking at the description, but you probably are anyways. What can I do about it? You know, I can't stop you. You have free will, assuming you believe in it. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of things I could have said in this video. There are a lot of topics that I am intentionally avoiding in this video. And there are a lot of topics that I didn't talk about that I'm not avoiding, you know, intentionally speaking. Because, well, they either don't exist yet, or I just didn't, for whatever reason, mention them. You know, and obviously Stargate SG-1 is not the only show I've ever watched. I've watched Arrow, I've watched The Flash, I've watched Supergirl, I've watched Legends of Tomorrow, I've watched, I think it's called Black Lightning. What other shows have I watched? I've watched Monk, which is a character from a TV show about a detective who has OCD. Okay? Alright? I always wanted to make my own fictional story. Like, at least write a book. You know, at least have a book. At least have a movie or a TV show. You know? Or a video game. But generally speaking, I want it to be a live action version. You know, I want it to be a live action movie or TV show. Because don't get me wrong, cartoons and those kind of fictions are cool. But it's really hard with live action, and it's the kind of hard that I like because it gives you a realistic idea of these characters are fiction, but they're acted by real people, and the only people that I would say should be like the only, what's the word, not stuntman, like it's a form of actor. What's the word? I forget the word. What would it be? What would the name be? I don't know. When somebody plays into their character off screen, where they play it so much they play it off screen, you know, as part of the thing. Those kind of actors. I forgot the name. I forgot the fucking name. Forgot it. But if I were to have that kind of actor, I would have them play a realistic role, even if they're playing a fictional character, even if they're a very exaggerated version of a normal personality. I would say if they can realistically have that in their lives, realistically have that as a part of, you know, who they are. You know, even if that isn't who they are in real life, if they can play it off screen, if they can play that character off screen all the time realistically without having to get into constant trouble, you know, unless their character requires them to get in constant trouble. But I would say people who play main characters that are, realistic in real life, or even if they're a fictional character, they can still, be able to actually play off that kind of character. That kind of thing. I'm going to turn the light off, see what happens, because it's getting bright out. Time of recording, because it's morning time. So, I'm going to see how bright it's going to get. Oh man, it's still very dark. Still very fucking dark. I'm really as shocked as you are. When it comes to this. If you're blind, you didn't see it. You didn't see it coming. In fact, you don't see anything coming. You don't even see darkness. You just see nothing when you're totally blind. But some of them, most of them, if you are mostly blind, you'll just see blurs or whatever your version of blindness has. Most people are not blinded from birth. Most people that I know that are blinded because they became blinded. Same thing with people in wheelchairs. They don't become born somebody like that usually, unless they have some rare disorder or, disability or disease. But generally speaking, they get those kind of things after birth, sometime after birth. I think, I didn't finish what I was saying earlier, but, most people on Earth don't die, from being born anymore. They don't really die from being young anymore. Historically, most people did. That's why a lot of civilizations had a hard time surviving, because the younger people would often pass. And don't get me wrong, older people in those times did pass too. But most people died young, so that kind of thing. That's why if you look at a lot of celebrities in the past, prior to the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, most celebrities who died young. And yeah, there were exceptions, that one guy in the 2010s or in the 2020s or whenever you're watching this passed away at a really young age. Yeah, that happens. There are people who pass away at a young age regardless. But I just mean, we're at a time where most people who are dying on Earth, because we live in a time where most people are dying, but most people who are dying on Earth in general aren't just dying from being old, but they're dying old from a full life. These people died into their late 70s or their 80s or their 90s. So pretty much a full life for, an adult, for a older adult. That kind of thing. Because once you start getting into your 70s, 80s, 90s, and later, if you get to it, if you get to your 100s or later, you live the full life. You got to live, not just getting old, but you got to live a full life expectancy or past full life expectancy, historically, most people didn't make it to life expectancy, people had a hard time making it to just being born, let alone getting to live a full life and dying, the oldest person who ever lived, even if the oldest person is, say, you to ever live, you're just lucky to even have that, because the oldest person to ever live in recorded history is 122. But if you want to include fictional characters, um, the character Teal'c from Stargate SG-1 would be 6 years older. But in the lore, he was born in 1998, and the oldest lady to ever live, I think, was like a French lady, but I'm not sure. I don't remember the exacts. But she died at 122 in 1997. And I bet you when she died, people didn't believe it. But anyway, that would have meant she was born in 1875. Very long fucking time, okay? Like, this is not something that is just like, oh, she was just alive for this time. No, that's a long ass fucking time, okay? She lived that and plus a couple extra days. But, a long time, okay? Well, anyway, even if you get to live for that long, you still die. You still eventually fucking die, okay? I don't think you're gonna be immortal. I don't think I'm gonna be immortal, but who knows? Maybe I will be. But, even if you do live to see me die, or see everybody else, even the youngest people around you who were born much later in your life, even them grow old and pass away, eventually you will probably pass away. And I don't really believe in an afterlife exactly. Like, I think that there might be one. I think that there's a possibility for one. Actually, I do kind of believe in one, but here's the thing. It doesn't really matter until you die. Until you're truly dead for, you as you, when you're in this exact specific version, in this exact body, when you truly die and you can't return back, in this exact body, this exact person, that's when you find out if there is an afterlife, and if there is an afterlife, which one, that kind of thing. And I would say it's only important when you come across it. Okay, you'll come across that bridge when you get to it. All right, that's what it means. So live life, not necessarily like you're gonna be immortal, just that you may die someday. You may die at one point. It could be, in the morning. It could be in the in the day. It could be in the afternoon. It could be in the night. It could be at any time. It could be really inconvenient. It could be really convenient, because there are a lot of people that got to die the way they wanted to. But there are a lot of people in history that just randomly died, Like, there are just a lot of people who are just like, they just so happen to randomly peace out at a time when they were most, religiously, politically, societally, culturally, if you want to go that far, linguistically relevant. Most relevant they've ever been in their entire life. They were in the height of their prime, they were in their golden age, and then they fell off a bridge or something, and then they, fell off a building or whatever, and then they just pass away, Like, you could literally die at any moment. Like, the fact that you're even watching this right now when you're still alive, it says something, Like, I don't know when you're watching this. I don't know how you're watching this. All I know is that you are, in fact, at least to my knowledge, watching this. So, there's that much knowledge that I can see. Anyway, what do you think? Is there any subjects do you think I should have mentioned? Are there any topics do you think I should have really gotten about? There are some things that I do want to talk about before I go. So it is going to make the video longer, obviously. So, and plus I have the time. So let's get started, shall we? Alright? Just let me drink my water first before I do so. I think The Simpsons has been running for way too long. Okay? Like, them even having a season 30, a season 38, season probably 40 is already way too fucking long. Okay? Like, you should have ended back in like, well, you should have ended back in like 1998, you know? Like, they just been around for a real long fucking time. Same thing could be said with Family Guy and I think American Dad if it's still running. But there's a reason why people still like Cleveland Show, even though it only lasted for a certain amount of time. And I think one of the main reasons why people like that show is because it ended. You know, it's not an ongoing series anymore. It's not an ongoing show. Same thing could be said with a lot of other TV shows like Stargate SG-1, which is one of my favorite TV shows. The Flash, the one from the 2010s or started in the 2010s. Arrow, you know, that was one of my favorite shows. Definitely a show that, like, the series started in like 2010, 2011, but it didn't officially start, at least in terms of the entirety of season 1 until 2012. But eventually that show ended officially in 2019, but as a project it didn't end until 2020, because usually as a project that takes longer to end, you know, as like a cultural thing, as an ongoing thing. It usually takes about a year, especially with live action, you know. But I'm like, when it comes to TV shows, I've always been more of a live action fan, you know. Like, don't get me wrong, I like anime, I like cartoon shows too. Like, I like Lego Ninjago and Lego Ninjago Dragons Rising and that other show. But the other show is still a part of the original series. It's kind of like it's like an extension of that original series. Whereas the Dragons Rising, yes, it is like a continuation of the series, but over the course of its seasons has sort of split it off into its own thing within the lore, within the series, and it works too. I think it's peak, honestly. I think it's a pretty good show. It's like, where is it gonna go next? You know what I mean? And sorry for spoilers, but the good guys are kind of losing. You know, the good guys are kind of losing, at least until they release new episodes. Which right now, currently speaking, they're releasing like 10 episodes, which is like half a season, and each episode is like 22 minutes long or so. But yeah, if you do have the time to watch it, that would mean that 10 episodes would be like 5 hours. So if you do the math, it would take you 10 hours to finish a season. I'm just saying. You know, same can't be said with Stargate SG-1, you know, because with Stargate SG-1, they're like 42, 45 minutes an episode. So it would take you like 6 hours or less than 6 hours just to finish 6 episodes, you know, or 4 to 6 episodes. A long time is what I'm saying. And, you know, I'm fine with that. But for me, when I watch a show or when I watch a show in a certain order, I always check to make sure if the shows have a certain amount of episodes. And I would say, with the exception of the first and the last season, Most seasons, generally speaking, need to have like a 20-second episode, limit, where as soon as they hit 20-second episodes, in that season, 20-second episodes deep, then they get a new season. You know what I mean? Like, that's how it should be. And it shouldn't even be set in the same year. For each new season should be a different year. That kind of thing. You shouldn't have it like anime, where it's like you have like 1,000 different episodes, and then, declare it as like 13 different seasons. You know what I mean? Like it gets weird. It gets really fucking weird with anime. Like, if you ask me, 20-second episodes a season, and the maximum amount of seasons a show should have, beyond the occasional one-hit wonder, which is usually around 3 seasons long, one-hit wonder TV show. Most shows shouldn't be longer than 13 or 12 or 11 or 10 seasons, because once you start getting into the double digits, that's usually when the show has been around just long enough to say, yeah, you've been running it for too long, but it depends on the show, you know what I mean? Like, some shows shouldn't even have made an episode at all, like, don't even really make sense to even have an episode. But then there are some shows that are just like, they didn't run long enough, or, they ran for too long, like I said with Simpsons or Family Guy, or Heartland. Heartland is a show that ran for too long. It doesn't have as many seasons as Simpsons or Family Guy, sure, but it's like, even though I like live action more than cartoons when it comes to TV shows, it's one of those things where it's just, it ran for too long, Like, I want to say ever since season 4, that show fell off. You know what I mean? Like, at least for me anyway, from what I've watched. On Netflix, of course. I don't like Gilmore Girls. Alright? It doesn't matter how many seasons of it there is. I just don't like Gilmore Girls. You know what I mean? If you ever watched my older videos. Just for context. But yeah. There's a lot of things you could really go on with that. Now let's go on to movies. I like the original Matrix. I like the sequels. I've never seen, what was it? John Wick. I've seen The Prince of Egypt. I've seen Tintin. I've seen the Avengers. I've seen that franchise for the most part. I've seen, well, I've seen Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. I've seen, I haven't seen the 2026, The Odyssey. I haven't seen, movies I haven't seen are like that, Minions and Monsters or something. But I don't know. I don't think I would ever see that. I don't know if there's any new movies coming out, but I have heard about, what is it called? How to Train Your Dragon. Did you know that it's based off of a book made in 2003? Like, I'm as shocked as you are just to find out that information, Like, 2003? You would think it, like, the original book was in at least, like, frickin', the 80s or the 90s because of how, how heavy and how cool the animation was. But from the original book, at least from this one, which is a remake, it's a 2010 remaster where it's made for the original movie, and it's one of the biggest franchises of the 2010s. At least if you're talking about the movies. But I'm not really sure, so I'm gonna look. Well, actually, this book is from 2017, so excuse me. But this was from 2003. At least that's what it says. You know? If you don't believe me, you know, I don't know if you can see those words. I certainly hope you can. Now I'm going to try to turn on the light off and see if you can see me. But, I don't know, cameras kind of have a shitty quality without the light. Well, I guess you can kind of see me. But anyway, again, what do you think about the topics or subjects that are talked about in this video? What do you think? What do you think? You know? I don't know what else to say. I don't really know much. I don't really have a whole lot to really even say at all. Actually, I do. What am I talking about? In fact, I think I have more time to talk. I think I have more than a little bit. More than that. Probably. But I don't know. This is pre-recorded. This video is pre-recorded. This fucking video is pre-recorded. So, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know when you're watching this, but if you are, just know I recorded this in 2026, and it was not the best of years. It was not the worst of years, but it was definitely not the best either, you know? So I wouldn't recommend being nostalgic for this kind of year, and if you are, stop it, okay? We don't need to go to that whole cycle all over again, because I come from the nostalgia era, and if you know anything about the nostalgia age or the nostalgia era, you would know that being nostalgic isn't exactly the best way to experience older things, you know? Like, there are just things that just so happen to originate from a long time ago, okay? Like, it doesn't mean you need to be nostalgic for a time you haven't lived in, okay? Or if you have lived in it, you're a very old person. But, that's all I'm really saying. But most of you mother shuckers, assuming you're watching this in the far distant future, whenever you're watching this in the far distant future, this video is from a long time ago, probably before you were even born. You know, it's probably not even in the century that you were born in, you know, let alone the you know, the decade, the year, the month, the week, the day, you know, or the hour, or the minute, or the second. You know, you could be completely different. You know, I don't even know if you use the Gregorian calendar, the calendar that I use, which is January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, September, October, November, December. Okay? There's 12 months in a year. There's 365 days in most years, unless it's on a leap year, which, if you're wondering, yes, it does mean that, you know, it does have on an even year, like it's even numbers for that specific year. For the century or the decade, not so much. Here's the thing. That does mean that there is leap years on centuries, but it skips 300 years.
So for each century for like 300 years doesn't have a leap year. And then after about 300 years, they'll have a new century where it is a leap year. So 2000 was a leap year, so we're not going to have another leap year until 2400. Which kind of makes sense if you think about it. But, because I guess it's a leap century, because it would be the first year of the century. That kind of thing. But there's so much time. There's only so much time I can make. There's only so much time you can make. So, what do you think? What do you think about this video? What do you think? I'm going to put this book back up on the shelf. You know, this Around the World in 80 Days, as you can see. It's not an original version, but it is a copy of the original. Bought it from Ollie's, if you're wondering. Yes, they do use the same guy for all their logos. Okay, it's their only mascot. Okay, so his face is gonna be everywhere. Obviously. Obvious-fucking-ly. Anyway, yeah, got a book that I'll probably never read, you know, because of illiteracy, and also just the fact that even if I wasn't illiterate, even if I was the best reader in the world, ironic enough considering the title, I probably still wouldn't read the book. I just have it to say that I have it because I read the title. I don't know if this is the original, like whoever made it back in the day in 1873 published it anyway. I don't know if that's like the first book to ever have that title. You know? I don't know if even that is original. But, yeah, it's a book. It's a fucking book. And by the time you're watching this, I probably have already read this book. The entire fucking book. You know? But I can't say. And I know that it's kind of mirrored, but in English, we start at the very top left, and we go from left to right to top to bottom, okay? So it goes like shh, and then it goes shh, 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 shh. But from my perspective, okay? Like in your perspective, it's like going from right to left. But, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Assuming you do. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. I really don't. Okay? I really fucking don't. I really fucking don't. It's morning where I live right now. It's morning where I'm recording this right now. Because there's day and night where I live on Earth. Okay, assuming you still call it Earth. A lot of the things that I say probably didn't age well. But this is pre-recorded, so you can judge it however you will. Alright? This video is very long. This video is very big. But I know you can watch it and probably handle it. But I could be very wrong. I could be very wrong about this. Okay? For all I know, you probably never even watched this video. All of it. You probably paused and stopped and, you know, obviously for whatever reason, you know, didn't watch the video all at once. But, again, I could be very wrong about this. But I want you to at least, when this video does end, to stop and think for once in your head for at least, like, I don't know, a couple of minutes. maybe 10 minutes, whatever time you still have left, and just, use it wisely. Not just smart, not just be literate, wisely. Now I'm going to put the book back. Anyway, I'm going to drink some of the water. Don't tell the Jews, don't tell the gypsies about this video. Mwahaha. I don't know what country or nation you're from, if it exists, if it doesn't exist. I don't know what, again, nation or country. I don't know what languages you do or don't speak. I don't know what gender you are, what age you are, what race you are, what ethnicity. I don't know who your family is. I don't know anything about you. All I know is that you're somebody who just so happens to be watching this video somehow. Okay? Like, is that hard enough to say? Is that hard enough to put? Is that hard enough to just nail it down to whatever it is? I don't know, man. Like, they put in like $1 billion just to put in one little scene where it's like this one famous guy, does a little tit-tat. And then could they spend their whole budget on that one scene, and then just the rest of the movie is shit because they spent so much money on that one fucking scene for like $1 billion. Like, what the hell? What the fucking hell? Again, do you, this is the end of the video, so, do you have any thoughts, answers, questions, ideas? And just remember, I am neither your friend, neither your enemy. Okay, I will repeat that. I am neither your friend, neither your enemy. I am neither your ally, neither your evil competitor. Okay? Whatever. Anyway, I think you get the idea. I really hope you get the idea. You can make your own video. You can record however long you want to record. I can't tell you what to do. I really do believe in free will, so I hope you do too. I don't know how you were going to use it, but this is how I chose to use it in this specific video. And I can't tell you what to do. I can only recommend. I can only say, hey, do this, do that, do this, do that. But are you going to actually do that, though? Are you going to actually do that? I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just somebody who just so happens to be talking, and you just so happen to be watching it on YouTube, assuming YouTube still exists. Alright? Alright? Okay. But again, if you have any thoughts, ideas, questions, whatever, you can comment, you can make your own mix, you can make your own video, whatever the case. I made a video. Talking, because that's what I like to do. It's longer than I normally make, like an hour or so. It's like 2 hours long, but you get the idea. Anyway, good morning, good day, good evening, and good night.